The Korean War is often described as the Forgotten War, overshadowed by World War II before it and the Vietnam War that followed. Yet its consequences continue to shape global politics, security alliances, and everyday life in ways many Americans may not fully realize. When fighting broke out in 1950 on the Korean Peninsula, it was not just a regional civil war, but the first major armed conflict of the Cold War, setting patterns that still define how nations confront one another without tipping into full global catastrophe. According to widely cited historical accounts, the war ended in 1953, not with a peace treaty, but with an armistice, meaning the conflict technically never ended, a reality that still hangs over East Asia today. The division of Korea into North and South hardened during this war, creating one of the most militarized borders on Earth, and that unresolved divide continues to influence U.S. foreign policy, defense spending, and diplomatic priorities more than 70 years later. Experts often point out that the Korean War cemented the United States' role as a long-term military presence in Asia, leading to enduring alliances with South Korea and Japan that remain central to American strategy in the Pacific. Those alliances are not abstract. They shape where U.S. troops are stationed, how military exercises are conducted, and how Washington responds to crises involving North Korea, China, or even Russia. The war also normalized the idea of limited war, where superpowers fight indirectly or with restraints to avoid nuclear escalation, a concept that continues to guide U.S. decisions in conflicts around the world today. Many analysts argue that without Korea, there might not have been the same framework for later Cold War confrontations, from Berlin to Cuba to Southeast Asia. The Korean War also mattered because it accelerated the militarization of the Cold War, leading to increased defense budgets, the permanent expansion of the U.S. military, and the strengthening of NATO and other alliances, trends that still influence how American tax dollars are spent and how national security is discussed in Washington. On the Korean Peninsula itself, the legacy is even more immediate, as North Korea emerged from the war as an isolated, heavily militarized state whose leadership has long framed its survival around resistance to the United States. Reports from historians and regional experts suggest that North Korea's pursuit of nuclear weapons and missile technology cannot be understood without recognizing the trauma, devastation, and unresolved fears rooted in the war years. For South Korea, the conflict laid the groundwork for a dramatic transformation from war-torn poverty to one of the world's leading economies and a vibrant democracy, a contrast that continues to highlight the long-term impact of political systems, international support, and security guarantees. Americans encounter this legacy whenever tensions flare on the peninsula, whether through missile tests reported in the news, diplomatic summits that raise hopes and skepticism, or debates over whether U.S. troops should remain stationed overseas. Beyond Asia, the Korean War still matters because it shaped how the United States understands its role as a global leader, willing to intervene militarily to defend allies and contain perceived threats. A mindset that continues to influence decisions in Europe, the Middle East, and beyond. Some scholars argue that the war entrenched a habit of intervention that has had mixed results, while others note that it also deterred larger conflicts by signaling commitment and resolve, illustrating how its lessons remain contested even today. The human cost of the war also resonates across generations, with millions of Korean families still separated by the border, and American veterans and their descendants carrying memories that only recently have gained broader public recognition. In recent years, there's been renewed attention to honoring Korean War veterans and reassessing the conflict's place in history, suggesting that its forgotten label is slowly being challenged. The war's relevance is also felt in discussions about nuclear weapons, as it unfolded at a time when atomic arms were new and terrifying, forcing leaders to confront the limits of military power, a dilemma that feels strikingly familiar in an era of renewed great power competition. According to many policy experts, understanding the Korean War helps explain why the United States approaches deterrence, diplomacy, and military readiness the way it does today, especially in relation to adversaries who may not share the same assumptions about risk or restraint. Even popular culture, from films to television documentaries, periodically revisits the war, reflecting a growing awareness that its story is essential to understanding the modern world. Ultimately, the Korean War still matters because it reminds us that unresolved conflicts do not simply fade into history. They continue to shape alliances, fears, and choices long after the guns fall silent. And that is something worth remembering the next time headlines from the Korean Peninsula flash across our screens.